Welcome to the Conscious Publicist Podcast, a space where thoughts become ideas to advocate for a more conscious human experience in the media. Our thoughts and ideas inspire action, and the most notable leaders and organizations have transformed thoughts and ideas into global initiatives that have impacted the lives of millions. My name is Ashley Graham, and as a woman-owned business founder and publicist, I guide leaders, visionaries, and creators in discovering their conscious media voice and methodologies that inspire connection, community, and impact through aligned media channels. In this podcast, we'll dive into public relations, thought leadership, business, and entrepreneurship, all through the lens of being a conscious human being. I'll take you behind the scenes into the habits, thoughts, and modalities that have helped leaders shift past paradigms of limiting beliefs, comparison, and self-doubt to show up for themselves to become the subject matter experts they were called to be. Subscribe to the show on Apple or Spotify and join us on this journey of awakening the conscious, enlightened leader within you. Have you ever stopped to ask yourself, does my life actually feel as good as it looks? As a postpartum mom and a 10-year entrepreneur, my own metrics of success look nothing like they did 2 or 3 years ago. And getting honest about that has been its own kind of unraveling. Today's guest is Kelley Hoag, a somatic behavioral coach, therapist, and the founder of Root to Rise. In this conversation, we go deep into what it actually means to redefine success on your own terms, not the metrics we inherit from our families, our industries, or social media, but the ones that are actually ours. We also talk about the difference between knowing your patterns and changing them, why so much self-awareness can stall out at the ceiling of traditional talk therapy, and how somatic work picks up where the ceiling ends. Kelley walks us through what it really looks like to work with the body, not just the mind, to interrupt old loops and get to the root of the behaviors we can't seem to shake. We also get into the role our families and upbringing play in shaping our definitions of success, the difference between comparison as a trap versus comparison as a compass pointing toward desire, and why the biggest transformations aren't dramatic cliff-jumping moments. They're the quiet, compounding result of small, consistent shifts. And because I found so much alignment to my own life in this conversation, we ended up talking about capsule wardrobes, letting go of things that no longer belong to this season of your life, and why clearing physical space so often mirrors the internal clearing we're doing underneath it all. If you've ever felt like your life looks good on paper, but doesn't quite feel that way from the inside, this episode is for you. I have an amazing guest who is bringing a very incredible narrative to the show today. Kelley, welcome to the Conscious Publicist Podcast. To get us started with our $1 million question, what story and message are you looking to tell through your brilliance and your wisdom today?
That your life can feel as good as it looks if we are able to redefine your own unique metrics of success and have clarity around what that is for you. It's different for every person.
As you can tell, that is exactly why I felt this conversation was supposed to live in this space. Because as a postpartum mom and as a 10-year entrepreneur, my metrics of success look vastly different today than they did, say, 2 or 3 years ago. So Kelley, with that incredible wisdom and reframe, how would you recommend somebody who is in that space redefine what success means to them?
I resonate with what you just said. I've also been in business for almost 10 years and my metrics look a lot different and probably for different reasons than you, but I thought that I had to live up to other people's standards, and there was a lot of comparison, and there was a lot of measures of success that weren't actually my own, but were conditioned from external people and things and social media and peers. And so I started to notice that things just weren't feeling good, even though they were looking good. And I always joke, I was living in Manhattan at the time, and I was going to Equinox and running on the treadmill in my cute little outfit. And in reality, I was crying and hated myself, and my life looked really cool and fun and chic, and I was living my dream life. And then on the inside, I was like, this doesn't feel like a dream. This actually feels really hard, and it feels like an uphill battle. And so once I was able to recognize where the dissonance was, that's when everything really shifted for me. And luckily, this took me years, but it's what I help my clients do pretty quickly now with a few tools and techniques that are super applicable. And one being, having values be really clear, because I think when we are living our lives based on someone else's values, that is a clear path to internal dissonance and having a life that looks good but doesn't feel good. And then the other piece of it also is redefining, similarly but different, redefining what it means to feel balance in your internal and external world. And I'm sure we can talk a lot about that, but that's really my jam.
And you said something that I wanted to highlight is that you now help bring this transformation for your clients way quicker than it was for you. But I feel that is how that process and how that paradigm is supposed to work. We can teach and help guide other people through our own experiences. So for you having to go through that long stretch of time to really have that awakening to be like, okay, this internal and external aren't actually connecting and I feel off balance. You really know how to get to the heart and the root of that for clients to have a much quicker transformation, which is kind of what we all we all kind of want. There's always this urgency that it's like we want the results right away, and sometimes it does come quick, but then other times it's supposed to be a slow burn because we
Yes.
learn more about ourselves through that. So I love that, and I just wanted to highlight that there.
And I completely agree with you. And I think it's also worth mentioning, for the sake of transparency and integrity, that I really believe in this work, the work that I do being a blend of somatics and behavior. It's meant to go sustainably. And sustainably oftentimes means slower than we really want it to happen. I think we're in such a land of instant gratification and dopamine hits that it can feel challenging to say, oh, this is going to take more than one shot, more than 4 sessions. But the beauty of that is that it's not a quick fix, and that it gets to feel rooted in your bones and in your cells. And that is how it becomes sustainable. And these tools that I teach my clients become tools for life and not tools for just a moment.
Absolutely. That's just what was resonating for me is it's not necessarily all about that quick turnaround time of the transformation. And I
hmm
love how you touched upon that. It really is this somatic, this deep experience. That's where the work lives. But say, for instance, if somebody didn't know what those tools looked like and didn't really know what those tools encompassed, then connecting with you and you giving them the tools that they need for the transformation that they're seeking, that's how they're able to experience the transformation quicker than, say, going on their own for the next 5 or 10 years and not really getting to the root because they don't have the tools or they don't have the resources or the support.
Yes. Yes. Agreed. Agreed. Agreed.
Again, highlighting something, let's talk a little bit about the somatic work. It's interesting because I've been using this identifier with the podcast that creating an audio platform like this and talking about real transformations with guests and how the audience can take it into their lives, it's almost a mirror into what is possible for them. So I love, again, saying that the podcast in a way is like a somatic tool, but I know that there is so much more deeper resonance to get from other somatic tools, whether that's other technology or just working with a coach like yourself. So walk us a little bit through what the somatic process looks like, especially with your expertise.
Yeah, gladly. So soma means body, and somatic means relating to the body. And if you've ever been to therapy, you probably know what your patterns are, right? I know that this happened to me when I was younger, and I had this self-awareness, and I know why certain things keep repeating themselves and why they exist. But having awareness of our thoughts and our behaviors is not the same as changing it. And so in the work that I do together, we focus on the body and how what you've been holding, what your body has been holding, is how it's affecting you. And then how that is affecting your behavior so that we can create a really tangible shift. And that's what I mean when I'm really big on the internal and the external. So, what's happening internally, deeply in your even subconscious, that's then affecting you outwardly, that's affecting your behavior or even lack thereof. And then also, how can we work with emotions and behavior? How can we work with the mind and the body? Because talk therapy, traditional talk therapy, it can be really supportive foundationally. But what I see with most of my clients who come to me after having done talk therapy is that there's a ceiling and they haven't touched the depth that they're wanting to touch. And so I always say the work that I do and that we do together is this peeling back of layers of yourself. And when I first got into somatic therapy myself, that's exactly how it felt. I was like, oh, these are parts of myself I've never even touched before because I didn't know the way in. And so when you say it's so beneficial to have people a couple steps ahead of us with an expertise that we're really wanting to grow into, then this is exactly it. We don't know how to touch these deeper parts of ourselves and peel back these layers because we just haven't been taught. And it goes really beyond the mindset shifts that we can easily access and into something much deeper and therefore much more sustainable.
Absolutely. The image that kept coming to mind as I was listening to you speak was in relation to talk therapy. I almost saw someone continuing to go through a loop. And with what
Yes.
you provide is you come in with a very sharp scissor and you cut the opportunity of that person staying in a loop and allowing this open space to really explore what they haven't been able to see on the outside because they've been stuck on the inside, the loop.
Yeah, I love that you use that word. I use that word often too. And that is the beauty of somatic work, that it penetrates beyond that conscious thought loop or the mind spiral, as I like to call it, to peel back the layers of what's living in your body and how is it affecting you. Because what's happening in the body is a massive factor that affects our behavior. And so a somatic behavioral therapy session with me, it will look in the beginning like a traditional talk therapy session where we check in and we name what's present, what's feeling alive, identify what to focus on for the session. But then while my client's talking, I say it's like a little Sherlock Holmesy, like picking apart the little things that we can pull the thread on. And pulling that thread usually looks like a somatic experience or practice or exercise. I'm a really big fan of parts work, specifically our internal family systems. And so in moving through a somatic practice, and that's how we really get to touch those deeper layers and get to the root of what's creating the day-to-day thought processes and the day-to-day behaviors and habits, so that internally there's more integration, so that the external, again, it goes back to the beginning, so that the external and the internal both feel good, and it doesn't feel like there's dissonance between the two because the internal and the external match. There's clarity.
There's definitely way more influence than we imagine from our upbringings and our conditioning of the people and the environments that we're in. That's what I took from that. What would you say, on average, is the experience that most of your clients come to you to have that big awakening, to find balance on the internal and external? Would you say it does live in the familial patterns?
Yes, it always, we can always relate things back to our family. Despite them having the best intentions, there's usually something there that we can connect back to childhood. And it really runs the gamut. It could be life isn't feeling as alive or sparkly because there's people-pleasing tendencies. And that happened because you were a middle child and you really wanted to keep the peace between your siblings and your parents. So, yeah, I don't think it's always super black and white, because if it was, then we wouldn't need to peel back these layers. But there's always something familial that's connected to why we are the way we are.
Yep, I'm over here awkwardly nodding.
Yeah, I can even speak for myself. And when we're talking about success metrics, my mom has her own business and she's a very successful entrepreneur. And for a long time, I was taking her metrics as my own. And I was wondering why my business, in theory, was doing really well, but wasn't measuring up in the way that I expected it to, or the way that I was essentially conditioned to believe that success should look like. And it only took me getting really clear on what my values are, what I, Kelley, value, noticing how that's actually really different from my mom. And no one is right or wrong. But because what I value is different than hers, then of course our measures of success are going to be different. And I really measure my success in my work and in my life. They're so intertwined, as I'm sure you know, that how present I can be in any given moment and on any given day is directly correlated to how rich I feel. And I don't say that in a silly way of negating the necessity of money. I'm all about money. I want to make money, but that's not the end all be all for me. Wealth is not my top value. Enjoyment of life is my top value. And so that is my North Star. And that is how I can measure it on a day-to-day basis, is what I'm doing right now, contributing to my enjoyment of life. If yes, great, keep going. And that's where I'm at, where it feels really sustainable. If not, I simply check in and I say, well, what's kind of not living up to where it needs to be, and what can I adjust so that I am back in alignment with these values and these metrics that I've come to on my own.
I'm over here. I feel like chills and this like overflow of energy from thinking about that. And like you said, going back to the term wealth, like you said, it's not to negate the actual monetary perception of wealth and actually having money in the bank, bills paid, not living in scarcity or in lack in any way. It made me think about this quote that I read maybe a couple months ago, and this was not necessarily in the beginning stages of postpartum, but a little bit further, but still very uncomfortable. And it said that a wealthy person, if they're going to a coffee shop to get a cup of coffee, they're the ones that aren't actually running out the door. They're the ones getting coffee, not in a to-go cup, but in a saucer to actually sit at the table or sit out on the patio and slowly slip that coffee. It says that wealthy people actually are not necessarily just running out the door to get to the next appointment, to the next meeting, to the next thing, to check off the thing from the to-do list. They're the ones that are there, present, enjoying every sip and savoring what the experience is like and being at peace. And that really sat with me because as a new mom and as an entrepreneur who has started projects, stopped projects, taken intentional pauses, fell into the urgency again, human being, very much writing the human experience, being in business. And right now, for me, the metrics of success is basically putting myself in the image of that woman, but with my daughter alongside me, being in the moment, watching her grow, watching all of these little quirks and these little things take form, but knowing that the space that I have to go and put into my business or put into the podcast is intentional. And it's ultimately to create this space and environment to have her alongside me, because then she gets to see a mom with a full cup and not just burning the candle on both ends and being tired and overworked and have no zest for life. For some reason, that's exactly what came to mind as you were speaking.
Yeah, that's it. The presence. It's huge. I totally agree with that. And as someone who struggles with their sense of urgency, I really like to get things done. And I think partially that's conditioning, right? And our society's definition of success being so linked to productivity. And I also think my urgency is also connected to my value of enjoyment of life, because I'm so excited and I'm like, I want more. I want to do more. I want to do all the things. I want to do all of it right now. My question for myself is, how can I find the abundance, but also the presence.
Absolutely. It's funny. There's always the glimmers, right? And chasing the shiny objects. I very much fall into that, especially with projects or creating new platforms. I fall into that urgency every now and then, even through postpartum, where I'm just like, oh, I have all this energy. I have these visions for this. I wanted to come all together. And it's because you really see the value of what you're offering. So it creates that excitement, which could easily translate into urgency. But I think if we're able to kind of take a pause and rewind and sit with it and then create the intentional space for it, that is how we're able to find the balance.
Agreed. And I think that somatic work really supports that. And I find with a lot of my clients and even with myself that the somatic practices that we do during a session, often I'm guiding clients to really feel into their bodies, right? That's the core of somatic work, the different sensations that are there. Our body speaks to us through the language of sensation. So when we're sitting and the eyes are closed and you're tuning in to all the different sensations that are happening within your own body, but without doing anything about it, letting it be there with a sense of curiosity and spaciousness, we're expanding our capacity to be with discomfort, our capacity to just fall into the urgency. And we're expanding our capacity to be present with ourselves, with discomfort, with all of the emotions and the thoughts that are constantly scrolling through our mind loop. So I think that's a huge benefit of somatic work alone is being able to expand our capacity.
Would you say that visualization is a big part of how you help people somatically in these sessions?
It is, especially with parts work, but it's not necessary. There's some
Okay.
people who can't visualize, who don't have that. And so it's not necessary, but it is part of it. And the way that I'll use that is connecting to the different parts of ourselves. Like we've all got an inner critic. We've got like a queen, badass, confident part. We've got a scared little girl part. All of these parts of us, the more that we can connect to them on a kind of textural level, like what's her facial expression? What is she wearing? If we have that visual ability, great, because it helps us connect to it as a part and not just like a fleeting thought. Because when we connect to it as a part, we can have a lot more compassion for it and therefore better integrate it so that we're acting from capital S self rather than a part that's screaming for attention and just reacting rather than responding.
That makes complete perfect sense. What would you say, helping some of your clients, I'm sure from all walks of life, what have been some of the unexpected parts of their awakening of the experience working with you that maybe they weren't expecting, but then also you weren't expecting, knowing what the end goal was essentially when you first had your first touching point with them?
I work with men and women and with people all over the world. And to some degree, at this point, there's a method, right? There's not a curriculum, but there's a method to the somatic behavioral combination that I use. So I can anticipate to some degree when a client comes to me for that initial call where they're going to go and what's going to happen. It's the same patterns, but there's some really cool, amazing things that happen when clients message me and they're like, Kelley, I've made more money in the past 3 months working with you than I made all of last year. And while that's not to toot my own horn, it's like, damn, see what happens when we spend a little time peeling back these layers? Like, how freaking cool the ripple effect. Or I've had clients come in and they're like, my job doesn't feel good and I've had this passion to do something else, but I could never do it. I'm scared. And what would my family think? And then 6 months down the road, they've quit their job and become a florist and they're super successful and never been happier. So there's just cool things where I never have the expectation for something like that to happen. That's not my MO, is that you shift your whole life. But when there's this self-trust that's been strengthened enough to make a shift that feels really aligned, that's cool to see.
That's why that question came to me, because what people don't really understand with a lot of the heavy mindset work is you can go in with an idea of what it is that you want to overcome, where you're feeling stuck. But when, again, cutting through that loop and opening up that space, there's so much more that can come in and so much more ideas, creativity, money, XYZ, you name it. And it's just when you clear, you open space for things. And so things will always come in. It's almost like a magnet.
The word clear, yes. And I would also take it a step further to say integrate. Because when we're able to see our parts and the different pieces of us that are at play with clarity and with compassion, and again, with curiosity, we become a more integrated version of ourselves. And that's when we feel more self-trusting. That's when we've already made little micro decisions in the day-to-day. So it feels a lot more confident to make macro decisions, like leaving the relationship or moving across the country. And again, that being said, I've had clients work with me for 6 months and we do a reflection and they're like, oh my God, I didn't even realize how much has changed over the past 6 months because it's been these micro shifts that now I'm looking back and like, who was that person 6 months ago? It happened before my eyes. And I have to say, I love that just as much as any of the big shifts, because that to me says that this is long lasting. This isn't an overnight situation that you're going to kind of fall back on into the habit of, but instead we've really planted the seeds for this to be ongoing. And when I say this, I mean a relationship with yourself that feels really good.
Which I feel is the root of the conversation. That's why this work holds so much value, is because when we are our fullest self, it's like life opens up for us. But when we're closed off or struggling, we magnetize that as well. And so that's why I was so excited to bring your voice to the podcast, because it really speaks to what is possible for people. And that is ultimately the biggest purpose that I have in life, is to use these conversations and to show people what is possible for them in their lives, and to hear straight from the mouths of the people who have been able to overcome their own challenges, their own limiting beliefs, or even comparison. You touched upon that earlier, and I am like, yes, it's such a common experience for so many people. So one, there's some humility and patience in that. But then it's like, well, why don't we show you what's possible for you, to where you don't have to compare your life to anyone else's?
I could riff on comparison all day.
It's actually aligned with a lot of conversations that I've been having recently, and it just shows how common it is. So please talk all you want about it, because as my trailer says, it's about helping people overcome their limiting beliefs and comparison to become the subject matter experts they were called to be. So directly in line with the energy here on the podcast.
Great. Well, my view on comparison is that it's actually just a really human thing that we all do. Similar with judgment. We're always going to have some area of judgment. I think it also shows us standards that we have. But how do we do it with acceptance for ourselves? And so if comparison can show us essentially what we're desiring, because there's a voice that's like, well, I want that, right? And if we let the comparison illuminate desires and then become something that feels really expansive and inspirational, I think it gets us out of victim and more into an honest way to move forward into the having. And oftentimes it's not even that we want the new car that they have or the house in Hawaii, although that'd be great. It's that we want the feeling that those things evoke.
Absolutely. In the context of why I chose that for the podcast as an energy and as a frequency in PR, it's common for thought leaders or entrepreneurs who start off, they look at either other thought leaders that are in their space or other businesses that do similar work but have their own specialty or own unique appeal. And it's common to go to a website and see all these press mentions and the logos, and they've been here and they've been there. And for an entrepreneur who is starting off, that can feel so out of reach. But why that relates to the podcast, but then also just that work as a whole, is it really kind of goes into some of the work that you offer of being like, okay, what are the unique elements about the way that you do business? What's the metrics of success in your message and your story? And how do we curate that in a way that would appeal to an editor or a writer or the publication or outlet as a whole? And sometimes I would assume, using some of your language, going through a talk therapy session of being like, okay, let's extract some of those details. And then we craft it in a way that is magnetic to the person that you're pitching it. As a new entrepreneur starting off in PR, seeing other PR agencies or publicists who had vast accolades behind them because they had been years in the making and had been doing the work much longer than I have, it felt so out of reach for me. But I sat with it and I really honed in on what makes me unique and how can I appeal to the places that I want to show up. And it was stepping stones. And next thing you know, one feature turned into 10 a year later, turned into 20, maybe 6 months from the year. And then it just kept tacking on. There's really stepping stones. And going into what you were saying, I thought about what I had heard from a creator recently about creating a glimmer jar, of tracking all of these little glimmers that you wrote down on a piece of paper, folded it, and then put it in the jar. And then a year down the road, you open the jar and then you look at all of these little glimmer moments that took place. Sometimes I feel, looking at the little bits along the way, we can appreciate everything that we've done leading up to the big goal at the end of it. And I feel that the same can go for marketing and PR. It's honor the little features along the way because it ultimately will lead you to the bigger feature.
We've got to be able to recognize what we've got. And I think it's very honest and real for us to always want more. And there's something fun about the more, like, oh, yes, more, more, more. I'm on a vacation. I want another vacation. It's a sunny day. I hope tomorrow's sunny too. We always want more. And also, there's something about really recognizing what we've already got and not in a bypassy, gaslighty way, like make a gratitude list and then hope the rest just comes. But it's, again, goes back to presence, being present with what is. And if we can't recognize what is and all that we've got, it's really hard to then ever feel fulfilled and feel satisfied. And frankly, I don't entirely believe that we ever will feel completely 100% fulfilled because of that human desire to want more, more, more. But if we can reconcile that relationship of like, there's part of me that feels so full right now, and it would be so fun to have more. I think that's really the sweet spot.
I've been putting together a capsule accessory collection. And it's interesting because going through the process of this one example is I am purging and getting rid of a lot of pieces, which quantity-wise, it looks very small. But to me, reflecting on it, it feels intentional. And I am like, this capsule accessory collection that I am building now are with pieces that when I hold them, when I put them on, they feel good, they look good, and they're intentional, real quality pieces. And sometimes, yes, don't get me wrong, if I go into the mall or go to a store, I'm going to be like, ooh, shiny object, ooh, shiny object, ooh, shiny object. But I have this clarity and this intention and an agreement that I have made with myself that unless it is something that resembles or speaks to this image that I'm putting together in this new season of my life, if it does not fit that image, it's not coming home with me. And there's a lot of freedom that I have received in this process and so much clarity. And again, what we were talking about, clearing the space, it's clearing out the things that don't belong anymore to welcome in the things that do belong. I don't know if that is a good example, but for some reason, this is what's like really speaking to me. We can go through this process in so many different ways.
I love this example because now you've got me wondering what where the kind of middle of the Venn diagram is with this, because I resonate and I am someone who has a very minimal wardrobe, but every piece I have, it's intentional and it's going to last. And I think that kind of encapsulates what I was saying about love what you have, love the pieces you have. There can be a desire for more, but that more is also intentional. So I love that example. How fun. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know if this is even going to align, but I'm just going to speak it and we'll see where it goes. And again, I don't know if this is relevant, but I had a conversation with a friend earlier in this process, and I was like, I feel like I keep getting stuck. It was before I really was able to separate what was staying and what was going. I had taken all the pieces out, I laid them out, then I got frustrated, and then I scooted them all in a corner again. And I was like, I can't look at it, I can't touch it, I'm stuck. And my friend, she gave me this perfect exercise. She was like, why don't you hold the pieces that you feel you're stuck with and thank them for the season that they provided and then let them go. And we had went into this narrative, my loop, which if it was gifted to me, I felt that I was doing a disservice to the person who was gifting it to me, even though that it no longer fit this chapter or this season of my life. And that's where she was like, why don't you just hold it, thank it, say thank you for the time. I am so grateful for the person who gave it to me. And I hope that you find the next person that you get to gift or provide happiness in some way. And I was like, wow. Once I did that, the clearing part became easier and it also felt better. So again, I don't know if this example is the best one, but to me, I'm like, yeah, it just really showed that how sometimes we can hold on to stuff mentally, physically, emotionally, but even through just tangible objects. And it really does mirror what it is that we're going through in our life in some way, shape, or form.
Now you've got me thinking about all the t-shirts that I've been hoarding my whole life. It's always the t-shirts. They always have sentimental value.
Absolutely, especially if you've packed them in boxes and they've gone from one state to another state and then they've gone to you to
Yeah.
different countries and you're like, well, we've spent this whole life together. How can I let
Oh,
you go?
it's true.
Oh my goodness. Well, to kind of bring it back to the conversation, what does working with you look like for people who are listening, who maybe want to experience some of these shifts for themselves? What do you offer as far as services or levels of support?
So typically I work virtually and I work with clients on a weekly basis for 3 months so that the relationship is built not only between us, but between you and you. And there isn't that sense of urgency, but there's instead devotion to the process. So that's a sweet spot that I found. And most of my clients work with me longer. I see clients in a few different capacities. It could be after those 3 months, it feels good to keep going at that same cadence. Or I have clients I've been working with for a few years and we meet once a month. But I find it to be after that initial challenge that a client comes to see me and they're like, I feel really anxious about work and I want some support with that. Or I'm going through a struggle in my marriage and I want to go a little bit deeper on what's coming up, or I'm feeling unfulfilled. I want to move, whatever it might be, after that initial challenge. And we kind of work past that in those 3 months. Then it becomes this nice space of play, raw play, where life happens, right? And so to have a dedicated hour once a week to once a month where you get to be guided inward and feel some of the things that we really put off feeling. It's such a gift. And that's why I do this for myself. That's why a lot of my clients keep working with me for years and years, is because a lot of the time we don't want to touch our stuff on our own. It's way easier to go for a walk and listen to a podcast, or it's easier to scroll or to call a friend and talk to them about it. It's kind of hard to just sit there and be with what is, but it's a lot easier when you're guided in by someone who has the expertise to guide you there. And it makes a world of difference afterwards, again, for that integration.
That right there, I just know there was a season of my life where it was really hard to really examine my own behaviors, my own mindset. And let me tell you, becoming an entrepreneur just really illuminates all of
Mm-hmm.
that. And you
Mm-hmm.
change significantly in business. I will always say that a business or starting a business mirrors what needs to go. And it takes a whole other level of strength and courage and resilience to really examine yourself and the things where they don't align anymore. And for anybody who pursues this type of transformation, especially with experts like Kelley, I just want to give you so much praise for taking the leap, because that alone is the biggest courageous act that has so much gifts given to you from making the decision.
I agree. I mean, our life is made up of these micro decisions, right? And so when we think back about, does it really need to be this huge leap, jump off the cliff moment and everything needs to be rattled? Sometimes, yeah, I've been there plenty of times. But also sometimes it's really about the micro shifts and how we can create a lasting change over time that feels really sweet on our nervous system and feels safe in our body.
Absolutely. And everybody deserves that. We are our closest relationship that we have through our whole entire life. We are all with ourselves in every season, every chapter. We're not going anywhere.
We're the common denominator in everything. Yeah.
And again, it's easy to look outside ourselves and to think that the most important relationships are other people. It's those outside of ourselves. And in really, it's not. Our closest and most valuable relationships that we have is with ourselves. And it is one that we should give the most love and attention and nurturing to, because, again, putting myself at the forefront in this new identity, my daughter is going to receive so much more in life, more love, more care, more whatever, you name it. She's going to receive so much more through the relationship that I have with myself. And that is the greatest gift that she could ever be given. And we're going to have the stronger relationship, which is in turn the greatest gift that I could receive as well. So
Mm. Yeah, I totally agree. Good for you.
thank you. Well, this has been such an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for following along with my very quirky examples into how myself I've been applying similar ways of shedding and creating space and just being more intentional about X, Y, and Z. How can our lovely listeners connect with you?
My website is Root to Rise Health. My Instagram is the same. And I don't post a lot there. I'm too busy being present, but I love chatting there. So if you listen and something stood out or you've got a question, messaging me on there is great. And we get to really have a dialogue and that's fun. So Root to Rise Health on everything.
I love that. Well, Kelley, I cannot thank you enough. Kelley had initially pitched me for a campaign that I was looking to host at the beginning of the year. And when I saw her email, I was like, this, I could just feel it. It
Hmm.
deserved its own space and deserved its own attention. So thank you so much for just reaching out and bringing your wisdom to the show. I know so many people are going to find a lot of value from it.
Well, thanks for having me, Ashley. I appreciate it. This is great.